The origin of smallpox was lost to history, but the spread of this disease follows growth and spread of civilizations and trade. The very first instance can be found back in Egyptian Empire around 3rd century BCE, where we can see smallpox-like rashes on the head of a 3,000-year-old mummy. One of the earliest written accounts of smallpox dates back to the 4th century Common Era in China, where they would appeal to the god Yo How Long for protection from smallpox. In the 6th century, trade between China and Korea brought smallpox to Japan. In the picture, you can see a woman wearing red. There was a myth created at this time that said red light would cure smallpox. By the 7th century, smallpox had spread to India, North Africa, Spain, and Portugal. In northern India, people worshipped a smallpox goddess named Shatala Mata. She was considered both the cause and the cure of smallpox. She represented good hygiene and was meant to motivate people for cleanliness. Eventually, by the 10th century, smallpox had made its way to Asia, including Turkey, Greece, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, and parts of the Middle East. It got there through major trade routes like the Silk Road. In the 11th century, European Christians would move to and from the Middle East, bringing smallpox to Europe. This would continue for the next 2 centuries. This would bring us to the 13th century. By now, smallpox had made its way to Central and North Europe as traveling becomes more and more frequent. It even reached as far as Iceland. As time progressed, new trade routes were being made, and by the 15th century, new trade routes with eastern part of Africa would introduce smallpox to West Africa and many European countries. The image shows a statue of Shapona, a West African god of smallpox. It was thought that smallpox was a disease forced upon humans due to Shapona's divine displeasure. Formal worship of the god was controlled by priests in charge of shrines to the god. People believed priests themselves were capable of causing smallpox outbreaks. By the 16th century, European colonization and African slave trade import would bring smallpox to the Caribbean and both Central and South America. Introduction of smallpox to Mexico by Spanish would happen around 1520 and was one of the major factors that led to the demise of the Aztec Empire. Treatments before the 16th century included herbs and special cloths for the lesions, but by the 16th century, new treatments would come along, including bloodletting and variolation. Variolation included grinding up dried scabs from patients who had been sick and inhaling them in China or scratching them in India into an arm of an uninfected person. The photo is the carrying case of these dried up scabs that they could send to different hospitals. Smallpox had made its way to North America from imports from European colonizations by the 17th century. This would bring us to the 18th century, where variolation was at a peak. It was introduced to England by Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, who was a survivor of smallpox, who would variolate both her children. The 16th century brought one of the most important people to the ending of this horrible disease, Edward Jenner. He also would become very important to modern medicine today with the invention of the vaccine. Back then, it started out with inoculation. Inoculation is very similar to variolation. Inoculation would include a needle filled with the matter from the pustule of a sick patient into a non-immune patient. Edward Jenner was born in Berkeley, Gloucester, and was the son of a reverend. He was orphaned at age 5 and ended up living with his older brother. At age 13, he apprenticed to a surgeon and apothecary. It was here where he heard a milkmaid say, "I shall never have smallpox, for I have had cowpox." This sparked his interest in protective effects. This would lead Jenner to bring about inoculation. Jenner would go on to publish his own work entitled An Inquiry into the Causes and Effects of the Variolae Vaccinae, a disease discovered in some of the western counties of England, particularly Gloucestershire, and known by the name of cowpox. At first, vaccination was not very popular. It took a while until vaccination would spread in England by 1800. Jenner went on to do several studies, internships, and became well known. He was married and had 4 children, where in Gloucester they built a house that included a 1-room hut in the garden called Temple of Vaccinia, where Jenner himself would vaccinate the poor for free. By the 20th century, smallpox had become widespread in Africa, Asia, and South America. At the same time, Europe and North America largely started to control smallpox with the use of Jenner's vaccine. Eventually, in 1980, the World Health Organization declares the world free of smallpox. Now, a little more information about the disease itself. There were many varieties of smallpox that would range with symptoms from mild to deadly. The incubation period ranges from 7 to 19 days. And in the beginning, 3 out of every 10 patients died. Early symptoms include fever, malaise, vomiting, and other symptoms could be convulsions, diarrhea, and most importantly, a rash. This rash would include lesions that would start out small, grow, change, and eventually scab. Now, these lesions, whenever they would turn gray, meant death. I'm about to show you some pictures of what these lesions look like on a baby and how they change from day to day. Some of these pictures can be uncomfortable and seem graphic, so please, take caution. On day 3 and 4, the lesions are considered macule, which means flat, distinct, and discolored. They start on the palms, hands, and arms, and eventually lead to the trunk and extremities. On day 5, the lesions are considered papule, which means elevated and discolored. Each lesion slowly begins umbilication. Day 6 and 7, the lesions are considered vesicle, which means elevated and sac-filled. They are shoddy, hard to the touch, and all have now gone through umbilication. By day 8 and 9, the lesions are pustule, which means pus-filled. They are at their max size and have started to begin flattening. By day 13, scabbing has begun on every lesion. The last day, day 20, Most scabs have separated except for the ones on the palms and the soles of the feet, and where the lesion was is also depigmented, and some even look purplish. To say that smallpox is completely gone would be a lie. The disease still lives in two known locations. The first, Atlanta, Georgia, at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The second, at the Russian State Center for Research on Virology and Biotechnology in Koltsova, Russia. Smallpox is considered the most dangerous of all biological weapons, even though, in 1972, the Bioweapons Convention Treaty was made, where it promised that all parties would destroy any stocks of smallpox and stop any kind of weaponry research.